So we are now officially recording this presentation. We want to welcome everyone to a presentation that Quaker Voice of Maryland and Erinn Camp Mansour put together, how to create change, advocacy, and the Maryland state legislative process. Erinn and I had some conversations where we thought it'd be really great to talk about some of the things going on in legislative session this year and how friends can get involved, because things are very virtual, and so it's a little intimidating. So the session already started on January 13th, but we still think there's plenty of time for friends across Maryland to get involved. So next slide, please, Erinn. And we all know, and part of why you're here, I'm sure, is that the impact of our voice is great, whether it's just one-on-one meeting with a representative or showing up in mass. We have power through our voice, and so it's exciting and empowering to know how to use it. Next, please. There we go. And so what we had on our list of things to learn about today is I was going to do a quick blip on Quaker Voice of Maryland. And then Erinn's going to take the baton and kind of lead us through some Maryland legislative process information, changes that we should know about due to COVID, and ideas on how to be an impactful advocate and tools on how to be an impactful advocate. And just if you're not familiar with Quaker Voice of Maryland, we're under the care of Baltimore Yearly Meeting, Chesapeake Quarterly, and we started in 2019. Our focus is connecting and supporting Quaker advocacy work across Maryland. And part of our work is discerning legislative priorities for the yearly General Assembly in Annapolis. This picture was taken during our 2019 retreat, which is why we all look very close. Next, please. And one of the great things about our group, why I'm really excited about it, is we are trying to get friends and Quakers who may not already be out advocating, lobbying and speaking up about issues that are important to them. How we do that is we partner with other groups who are already doing great work. And so some of the partners are listed there below. Maryland Alliance for Justice Reform has a lot of Quakers involved with it. Interfaith Action for Human Rights does too. All of these, I've run into many Quaker faces. So if you're interested in learning more about the efforts we're going to be taking this year for lobbying and getting active, feel free to visit our website and I'll share more about that resource. Next. And on our resource, things you can find are things like our one-pager with our legislative priorities for 2021, and also other resources that Erinn's going to be pointing out about how to find your representative and how to figure out what committees people are and other things like that. So please consider our resource, our website, something that you should visit as a resource if you have questions about advocacy work in Maryland. And just to get our heads ready to think about what Erinn's going to share with us, when we're talking about advocacy work, when we're looking at the landscape of Maryland, what we're looking at is a map like this, right? We're looking at all the different districts and parts and where you fall on this map, because the person who's your representative based off your district is where your voice can really shine. They're the people that really want to hear from you. Next, please. And if we start thinking about Quaker meetings around Maryland, this map shows where our presence is when we're looking at districts. So it's pretty interesting to see if you're associated with a meeting, what areas speak to, what areas of Maryland we have voices and what districts those Quaker meetings are connected to. And the next slide will show how when we start talking about the members of our meetings, that's this yellow hash symbol that you see kind of growing out. And so when we start thinking about where our meetings are and where we personally live, we can start seeing how our Quaker voice can really grow and start to cover Maryland, which is really exciting for me to look at. So at this point, Erinn's going to take the baton and start sharing with you how you can take part and take your little point on the map and bring voice to legislative issues going on right now in Annapolis. So thanks, Erinn, for coming and joining us today.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Molly. And thank you for that introduction. And Quaker Voice is great, amazing. And those groups you mentioned in your alliance, I think are a great way, given one of the questions in the chat that asked about how to connect with other groups. I think those groups that you've identified, I think it was maybe 4 or 5 of those groups, anybody who's interested in joining, by going to their website or getting on their newsletter or their email feeds, or those are great places to go for supplemental information or a way to connect with groups who are already doing a lot of the things that we're interested in doing as well. So I'm just going to introduce myself for those of you on the call who don't know me. My name is Erinn Camp Mansour, and I am currently a legislative aide for State Senator Clarence Lamb. And I'm also co-clerk and a member of the Peace Committee at Sandy Spring Friends, and I attend Patapsco Friends because I live in Ellicott City, Maryland. I also have been working recently with Howard County Peace Action and became their coordinator, I guess in 2019, I think. So I do work with them and Maryland Peace Action, which has become more active. So if you're not engaged with Maryland Peace Action, keep that in mind. I'm a board member there too as the Howard County chapter representative. And then I've also actually started this advocacy program and kind of workshop with my Patapsco, as a vice president for advocacy and membership and as a volunteer for the PTSA at Mount Hebron High School. So that's another way that I've been trying to engage kids and parents and members of the community through my school group. I kind of mentioned those just so you know me, but also so that you can start to think about what your connections are and where you currently are active as a volunteer or as a member of a professional association or as any community that you share and kind of engage with currently, that would be a great way to start kind of your advocacy process, because those are the folks that maybe you can connect with on issues that are of interest to you, and that helps a lot with advocacy. So keep that in mind as we go through the program. This is just, again, a little bit more background. Again, this is one way, my way of how I kind of became engaged in advocacy and legislative activities. I have a master's degree in public policy from the University of Maryland School of Public Policy, and I have a bachelor's degree in political science and actually second major in Russian from Johns Hopkins University. That is relevant, obviously, in terms of whatever your particular area of study or interest or experience from work or volunteering. Those experiences carry weight when you go and talk to your members in terms of they're always looking for people with different experience and expertise and experts in areas. And so whichever areas are your specialty, whether it's education or in the environment or whatever you trained in, those can all be good things to mention if you're in a visit or in a written letter or testimony as what makes you kind of an expert in that area, which helps people get oriented about your perspective. I've also worked as a director for field operations and a volunteer and contributor for various party, local, state, and federal campaigns. So getting active with whatever your political affiliation can be a way, not necessary. If you prefer not to, that's totally fine. And regardless of your party affiliation, but that is a way to connect with people who perhaps share your views on lots of issues and be able to network and do things together with them when you're talking to elected officials or trying to get active. Again, I've had a variety of volunteer positions. I was, on the board of directors for my HOA. I was on the board of trustees for my kids' Montessori school when they were little. I've also volunteered as a public information officer, EMT, and firefighter trainee. Didn't really do a lot of firefighting, but I got trained up, which was really fun, by the way. And it helps me connect with different groups on issues like, what are issues for emergency workers. And then in terms of legislation, I actually got active and ended up coming into work for the General Assembly when I was working on the Maryland Welcomes Refugee kind of effort with some friends in the peace community back in 2015 when that was a big issue. It's still a big issue, but it changed under the past administration in terms of how many refugees were coming in, through the refugee programs. But I ended up doing a lot of work in Annapolis and going to legislators' offices and petitioning for them to sign a letter of shared support for Syrian refugees, or just refugees in general. And so that was a great activity that helped me get engaged and learn a lot about advocacy. And then, like I said, I've also been very active since I have 3 children who are now teenagers in the public school system. I've been very active in the PTAs for their schools for the past 15 years or so. This is just an example, and then we're going to move on to the kind of content of the program here. Another area, so this kind of activity over my lifetime led me to be working for the Maryland General Assembly for about the last 5 years. where I've been working with state legislators as a staff member for this time, and I've learned a lot about the legislature. And then when you've been kind of working as an advocate or then working in legislation for a while and working with folks who run for office, sometimes people start asking you, are you going to run for office, or when are you going to run for office? And if you start volunteering or you've been active and anybody's been asking you that, which they might have been, it's probably a good thing to think about, because people don't tend to do that lightly. And it usually means that they think you're somebody who might reflect their values, and maybe they can't or don't want to, be an elected official, but they definitely want people they, I don't know, feel comfortable with or feel like they share their values with to be willing to do that. So I'm currently doing what's called the Emerge Maryland Candidate Training Program, which is a group that recruits and then selects a few women to train how to run for office so that they can be available and hopefully run and win races in the future. And one of the activities they had us do, which I thought was kind of useful just in this context, as something you might do or you might do with some friends when you're going to go do some advocacy, to try to think through your life and introduce yourself to your friends or a group you might be wanting to work with, and just to get your head in the space for advocacy in terms of where did you grow up and what were things that were values for you when you were a kid. And so this one shows kind of that I grew up in DC metro area, and my parents worked for NIH and EPA. And so that gave me this kind of federal and government kind of orientation where I thought people who worked for the government and who did that kind of work were my family. For one thing, that was our family business. I have a lot of teachers in my family and government grandfathers, so I have a history of that. That's part of who I am, and I thought I would be as an adult, which I have ended up sort of doing. I'm very, Maryland, I've grown up in Maryland, and I feel very connected to the state and trying to make it a good place to live and work and have good values together with others. I've been active with political parties. These are some of the schools I went to. Grew up in Maryland, went to Wheaton High School. I went to Johns Hopkins, and then I got my master's degree in public policy from the University of Maryland. And then I did some volunteer work and worked for the county, Howard County, for a while. Did a lot of community service, like I mentioned before, and got really active with peace action. And then of course, my core values and focus is on my family there, which my 17-year-old did that cartoon of us for our Christmas card. So I thought that was kind of fun. So you could do something like this just to get oriented with some friends, or just on your own, just to kind of keep these things in your mind as you're beginning your advocacy journey, that any of these associations or some of these kind of orientations are part of kind of what makes you up as an advocate in terms of what's personal and special about you. And then your story can be very impactful when you're connected to that kind of identity, and then sharing where that comes in when you're advocating is very helpful. So next, I'm going to move on to the state legislative process part of the presentation. And I want to start by going through the Maryland State General Assembly website. We have a great website. Oops, I was supposed to link. So let's see if I can get that to link. Oh no, sorry, I'm having a little technical challenge here. Okay, so I want to go over a little bit about where I work and how you kind of get engaged in the process. For hopefully many of you have already been to the Maryland General Assembly website, but this is it. And again, the PowerPoint slides will be available to you after the session, and you'll be able to reference them with what you're working on. Let's see. So one of the first things that you want to get familiar with is I want to let you know that there's some videos, which if you scroll down on the homepage for the Maryland General Assembly website, at the bottom, there's a variety of video tutorials, and I'll just take you there. I'm not going to go through all the tutorials, clearly, because these tutorials are available to you all the time, but I definitely would encourage you, if you have not used them or watched them before. They're not very long. There's about 30 minutes worth of videos here that go over the introduction to the Maryland General Assembly website, understanding the bill page, which goes through some of the features that are available about how to understand, the bill itself, and to see hearing videos of past sessions. You can learn about searching bills, which we can do certainly later more on if you'd like additional help with that. Finding your legislator is obviously an important first step. If you don't know who all of your legislative representatives are, I'll go over that briefly with you to make sure that you've got that. Searching media has to do with searching many of the sessions, and this year more than ever. The floor sessions, committee sessions, voting sessions this year, which is new, are all available through recorded video that are available throughout the General Assembly website. And especially on the bill pages, you'll see that if the hearing has already taken place, or if one of the like cross-filed bills or a bill that's almost the same but in the other house might have already had its hearing, you can look at the video for that hearing, which is really helpful to understand the issues and the folks who are testifying on the bill. And if it was introduced last year and it's getting reintroduced, a lot of the testimony and the video from those sessions is available from last year, which is a great way to get oriented. Even if the hearing hasn't happened yet this year, there may be a video about the or materials about that bill previously that you can check out. There are also bill tracking lists, so you can get into your My MGA account and you can track bills so that you get messages when things move from one stage to the next of the process, which is helpful to know when to engage. And then there's what I am going to take a couple minutes to go over, which has to do with creating a new My MGA account. If you don't have one, you need one this year in order to sign up and testify for bills. And so I am gonna play these and go over how to sign up and be a witness. But I do want to go ahead and touch on a few more things before we do that. So, whoops, I'm gonna try to go back to my presentation. Sorry, I'm having trouble staying on the right page. So like I said, the videos at the bottom of the page, one of the things on that quick links kind of section of the homepage. So keep that in mind that if you scroll to the bottom of that page, you've got those video references that are really helpful later to watch or rewatch what you need to engage in various parts of the website. So I would encourage you to do that. There's also an About the General Assembly section. Again, that was at the bottom of the homepage. You'll see a link that says About the General Assembly. So this has some basic overview. Again, I know this group may be a little bit more educated than the average, so you guys may already know a lot of this information. But in case you're not, this is a good place to get oriented on kind of how things are and how they work. And then I do want you to know, especially if you're working with others who might not be as experienced as you are, that there's a nice little 2-page link here on the legislative process, which I've used a lot with students and people who just aren't as familiar with kind of how things work. And we're having a little bit of a pause here while we're trying to bring that up. If we can bring this up, it will show you the legislative process in like a 2-page kind of handout sort of reference. Not sure why it's doing that. All right, so I'm just going to go back. Maybe I'll come back around to that a little bit later. The gist of that is that it goes through with a little chart essentially of what the legislative process is and shows you the flow of basically introducing a bill into one house. You can introduce a bill into either house, either the Senate or the House of Delegates. So if you know your legislator who's a delegate or senator, you can talk to those individuals and start to talk about what you're interested in and see if there's an existing bill or a bill that they're planning to introduce or they're familiar with that another member is introducing. And you can start to work with them on that bill. So the bill is obviously introduced in the House or the Senate first. Let me see if it worked here. Nope, didn't work. Okay, didn't connect to that. That's new. Let me try one more time here. All right, I'll work on it later. But this is where it's located, and I will try to get it later in the presentation. But the gist of it being, again, that you can have a bill introduced in the House or the Senate, and it will go through to first reading, which is when they introduce it into the House. It gets a bill number. You get a bill page after that, where you can go to that bill page and see the bill. And then you can follow that bill as it goes to committee, and that would be the first stage where you here, we'll go to the committee page. So I work for Senator Lamb, who works for the Education, Health, and Environment Committee. And meetings on this page would show what legislation is being considered by the committee. It shows the members of the committee. For a particular day, it'll show the meetings that are coming up. So when they're going to have hearings, and they'll show what bills are going to be on the schedule. The helpful part about the members of the meeting would be that you can identify if the first stage of the bill is going to committee and being considered by those members. And once you know it's assigned and has a hearing date, you can go and find out who the members of that committee are, and you can begin to focus. Now, if you have a member that's your representative, obviously that's the first place to start, because those folks are dedicated to you as a constituent, and to make sure that your opinions on that particular bill are known to that member. If that member is a sponsor of the bill, you can offer to be a favorable witness and submit written or oral testimony in favor of that bill, and coordinate with the sponsor of the bill, which is usually the first name listed on the bill is the sponsor. So you can start there in terms of connecting with folks who are presenting your bills. If they're not particularly a sponsor or affiliated with the bill, then you can just let them know what your position is, so that when they vote for the bill, if it comes out of committee, then they can do that. Or they might be able to have communications with somebody who's on the committee that's a friend of theirs, and make sure that they're voting the way you're hoping. So these are some of the ways you can get engaged with the committee and where that first stage is. So once the bill comes into the committee, then if it doesn't get approved, get a favorable report from the committee, it won't go anywhere. So the first hurdle for any bill is obviously to get a hearing and to have testimony submitted, and then hopefully if it's something you support, for the committee to vote it out of committee favorably to the floor, which means it comes to the second reading on the floor, which is where it could be amended, and it will be prepared for a final vote, which is that third reading, which hopefully I'll get that the process working at some point. The process map will show you that clearly. So that's kind of the legislative process. It'll go to the floor, have a vote, and that's what most people think of when their members vote, that you can at that point be, if you know that the bill is going to have a vote on the floor, you can contact your members and say, there's a vote coming up on this bill. I want you to vote for the bill. And then you can also reach out to other members of the assembly through emails and phone calls to petition them when the vote comes up, to vote in favor of bill you're supporting. So keeping track of that process and when the timing of when you want to reach out to your members is obviously very important. And we can talk about that more in the question and answer session. I think we have a lot of questions on that sometimes.
Erinn, I think the link might have loaded for the process.
Great. Okay.
Shoot, never mind. I saw it change up there to say that. So
I've actually haven't had this happen before, but I'll try to get it later and come back around, because it is elsewhere on the site. So I'll take you somewhere else. Let's see if we can find another way, because I was going to mention too, on my screen, it's a little bit hidden. So let me move that down. At the top right of your, the home page and every page, actually, you'll see something that says Legislative Services. And if you go to the Legislative Services page, there's a couple important things on this page that I wanted to mention as well. If you haven't been to the library, if you click the library on this page, this is the area that includes the contact information on the right here for the email, libr@mlis.state.md.us is the email contact, and there's a phone number there too for the staff of the library. And the Maryland General Assembly Library is open not only to members of the staff and the legislators to do research, which is they do research on topics that we request from them to prepare for bills and testimony, but they also are available to the public. So anyone who wants to get help or figure out how to get started on a particular issue, or to do some research on previous bills and current legislation, this is a great and easy way to send an email to a librarian and ask them for help and tell them what you're trying to do or what you're interested in. And they send you great resources and links, and they know where everything is, and they'll send you an email back often that has links to articles, links to bills, links to and descriptions of various things. So they're a great resource, and they are on this legislative page. And then if you notice over on the left here, it says legislative process. Let's see if this one works, because There it is. Okay, so the legislative process map that I was trying to get for you is on a couple places on the website, and for some reason the General Assembly site is giving me some trouble. But lots of things are on multiple pages, so keep your eye out for helpful little links on different pages you're on. So this is the legislative process. It just is a 2-page document. It lists kind of that process I was trying to describe to you, and the second page has this really great little graphic that just shows how you can introduce a bill in either house and how it moves from first reader, like I mentioned, to committee, second reading, which is amendments, and final preparation for the third reading, which is the vote. And then they'll have a vote in whichever house, the House of Delegates or the Senate, and goes to the other chamber, goes through the same process. And then once it's voted out of the second chamber, if it had any changes in the second chamber from the first one, so the versions would be slightly different of the two that passed, it would have to be reconciled afterward, or the second house could just vote to essentially go back to whatever the original house was, whatever the version was. So they could either vote at the end on one or the other version of what's being proposed to them. And then the other house would have a chance to kind of, again, either agree and just vote to kind of do what the other house did. Or it goes sometimes to a conference committee where they'll select some members of both houses to have a meeting and try to hash out kind of a final version. And then one more thought on that is that many of you may notice that there's something called a cross-file bill, which means that essentially the identical bill was introduced and started on the Senate side and on the House side. And so there's 2 versions of that bill that are running through this process. And the idea there is mostly just to speed up the process a little bit so that basically you can have your hearing in the House and your hearing in the Senate on basically the same bill earlier in the process, to give them both a chance to kind of know what the other house is thinking about the bill and to get through the process a little bit quicker. So if one bill gets moving, the other house has already kind of had a hearing on the same cross-file bill, and they're in better position maybe to get it through quickly if it's something that both houses generally are in agreement with. Okay, so we did get that.
And how does the governor, like overriding a governor veto, fit into that process?
Sure. So the last step there was the governor's, the veto process. So if it goes to the governor, basically it would, he could either sign it or he could let it become law by not signing it, or he could veto it. And last year he vetoed a lot of bills based on how much they cost. So if it had a price tag, almost all of those he vetoed automatically. So those are on hold essentially, or do not go into effect until the session can start again. So in January now, the General Assembly is looking at overrides for last year. So I think currently they are working on passing as many as they can that had almost a unanimous or very high vote from all the members last year to get those bills overridden quickly. So they'll hold votes at the beginning of the next year's session. So 2021, we're doing overrides for 2020 legislation. And so they'll put them on the agenda, they'll vote for the override and the ones that they can get done quickly. We're trying to be very efficient this year. We have a lot of back work from last year. So the president will put them on the agenda, they'll do the vote override. For the ones that may or may not have enough votes to override, the president and will have to decide when to put it on the agenda, and then they'll make an effort to override them. What can happen is that based on the governor's veto, some of the members, for example, some of our Republican members who may want to be more aligned with the governor's decision may have voted for something that they won't now that the governor has vetoed it. Or any member who may have been on the fence may vote differently. And so each override that is brought up by leadership to the agenda and to be voted on the floor may or may not have enough votes to override the veto, in which case, leadership will decide what to put up when and how to handle that. But certainly at the beginning of session, if you have something that was vetoed and you're supportive, that would certainly be an important time to send messages, certainly to the president and the Speaker of the House to encourage them to put it on the agenda, and or any of your constituent members to get them aware of the override and that you really would like it to be overridden, and what can you do or what's the status of that to see if it's going to come on the agenda, and when to start advocating directly with your members about that override. So I mentioned the Department of Legislative Services. There's also dates of interest that I want to make sure folks know about, this is the calendar of the session and important dates. So one of the important dates that's coming up right now is the House and the Senate introduction date, which is February 5th and February 8th. And what that means is those are the dates where if a member has a bill drafted and has not yet introduced it, so has not taken it to the clerk and officially put it into the General Assembly for the schedule to have its first reading, which is that first stage, they have until February 5th in the House to do that, and to the 8th in the Senate for a Senate bill to drop it in the clerk's office, which is called dropping it in the hopper, if you've heard of that. And then it will be processed like a regular bill. It will get a hearing and it will go through that process. If it's dropped after those dates, members can certainly still introduce bills, but they will then have to go to rules because they'll be submitted after those introduction deadlines. And that means they have to get out of rules first before they will even be heard by the General Assembly. And many bills won't come out of rules because they are late and we have a very full schedule. If they do, maybe because they were late, but they were kind of an urgent matter that came up after the deadlines, they have to get out of rules and then they're kind of late in the process. So they'll have to move through and may not make it because of timing. So really, if you're trying to get something introduced or your member has a draft, but they haven't put it in yet, like they haven't decided, now would be the time to petition them to do any of those bills by the 5th and the 8th to make sure that you have a good chance on that bill. Ones that go in after those dates probably don't have as good of a chance to make it through in time. So those are some dates that you should keep an eye on. And those are available again at the bottom of the homepage where those quick links are. So you can check those out just to stay on top of those. Oops. And then I am going to go back to the video tutorials and I'd like to go down to the ones that have to do with testimony. So if many of you have testified in the past when the bill gets to the committee and gets assigned a hearing and it's open for public testimony, you in the past would come down the morning of the hearing and sign up in person and submit your written testimony. Last year it was electronically submitted, so it was available online afterward, which is kind of a new feature, which is great. And this year it's not working that way since we're virtual for COVID. Now what we're doing is that you need to create a My MGA account, which is just your email and a password and a way to get started in the system. And then you need to know how to do your witness sign up online on the date and time that's designated for that particular bill. So although this is a video, I want to run through the video real briefly here and then answer questions on this process if you have questions. And they're pretty short videos. One's 2 minutes, one's 4 minutes. But that way we make sure we hit all the features that I want to make sure you're aware of.
If you are someone who wants to actively participate in the Maryland legislative process, MyMGA is for you. When you have a MyMGA account, you can track bill activity through our automated system. Also with an account, you can sign up to be a witness at a bill hearing and provide testimony. But before you can do anything, you have to create an account. It won't take more than a minute. Here's how. Click the MyMGA icon at the top right of the MGA website. Click Create a MyMGA tracking account or click Register. Enter the requested information in the fields. Click the Register button. Go to your email program and open the confirmation email. Follow the directions to complete the registration. Your browser will open and you will see the Account Registration Complete window. Follow the directions to sign in. Enter your email and password and click Sign In. Your account is all set. Each time you log into your MyMGA account, the landing page is the Bill Tracking Lists page. This is where you'll set up lists of bills to track. We'll show you how to do that in another video. For now, we want to show you a couple of other things about your account. Should you need to change your password, select Change Password from the menu. Select Edit Account to change your account information. If you ever want to cancel or unsubscribe your account, select Cancel Account from the menu. This will immediately delete your account and a new one will need to be created if you wish to track bills in the future. Refer to the FAQ document as another source of help with MyMGA. Use the Sign Out button to log out of your account. We hope that you've learned how to create your MyMGA account. If you have any questions or comments, go to the footer at the bottom of the page and select Contact Us. Click Send Feedback to send an email to webmaster@mgadls.state.md.us. Thank you for visiting the Maryland General Assembly website.
Okay, and then I'm going to run through the witness sign up, and then I'm going to go through some kind of key features that have changed and some tips to make sure you don't have trouble and that you know that you are signed up after you sign up, which can be a little bit tricky, but we'll run through this real quick. I may pause it now and then just to highlight a couple things.
As part of the Maryland legislative process, standing committees meet during session to receive testimony and take action on bills referred to the committee. Bill sponsors, citizens, and other parties supporting or opposing legislation have an opportunity to submit oral and written testimony at the bill hearing. If you wish to provide testimony on a bill, you must have a MyMGA account. Refer to our video for directions on how to create one. When you are signed into MyMGA, click Witness Sign Up from the menu. The landing page for witness testimony shows the available hearing schedules, grouped by committee, that have bills that are accepting or allowing testimony. I want to testify on House Bill 260. I know it's being heard by the Senate Finance Committee, so I'll use the committee's dropdown to filter the list. Now I can see all the bills scheduled to be heard by the Finance Committee and that are accepting testimony. If I didn't see the bill I was looking for, it probably means that the committee is not accepting testimony for that bill at this time. Lucky for me, I can see House Bill 260 right here. Now I need to select a position from the dropdown. My testimony for this bill is favorable. Then I need to select the type of testimony I'm going to provide. I'm going to provide both oral and written testimony for this bill, so I'll choose both. Oh, look, the Upload Files button just became active. This is because I'm providing written testimony and I'll need to upload it before I can save my sign up. To do this, I'll click the Upload Files button. Now I need to select the files from my computer. They must be PDF files or the system will not save my sign up. I can upload up to 10 PDF files, but I only have 2, so I'll click Choose Files and select them both and click Open. I will click OK to close the window. I want to double check that this bill is selected by confirming there is a check mark in the box next to the bill number. There it is. Finally, I need to click Save to upload the files for my testimony and to save my sign up. If you sign up to provide oral testimony in a House committee, you'll see a pop-up window letting you know that spaces for oral testimony are limited and check your email for next steps. I'll click OK to close that. Once your sign up is saved, that Upload Files button becomes an Edit Files button. If I want to remove a file that was uploaded, I need to click the Edit Files button and uncheck the box next to the file I want to remove. I can add new files while I'm here if I need to, but I don't. So I'll just click OK and then click Save one last time. This Cancel button will refresh the page and reset any changes that were made after the last time you saved. If you want to see a list of the bills that you signed up for, click the Signed Up Items button. If you see something that needs changing, like your position, then click Witness Sign Up from the left-hand menu. Find the bill and make the changes, just like when you signed up the first time. Don't forget, save your changes by clicking the Save button.
I'm just pausing the video just for a second here, just to let you know, the changes opportunity will be only during the 10 to 3 time of the day when sign up is open. So it's sign up, and I'll go over this a little bit in just a second, but sign up will be taking place 2 days before the hearing in a window of 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And you can change it during that time period. So if you submit it at 10 in the morning and then you find another document you want to add, you can do that within that 10 to 3 window. But once the sign up period ends at 3, you won't be able to edit or change those entries. So just keep that in mind. And then also when she mentioned saving, you need to definitely click the save and make sure you saved it when you're completely done with sign up, because if you don't realize that and you just exit out, you may have done some things that didn't get saved and you don't quite realize, and then later you're not signed up. So that's another thing just to keep in mind.
For questions about your witness testimony sign up for a bill, or for procedural information about witness testimony sign up, contact the committee assigned to the bill and refer to their guidelines. If you have any questions or comments, go to the footer at the bottom of the page and select Contact Us. Click Send Feedback to send an email to webmaster@mgadls.state.md.us. Thank you for visiting the Maryland General Assembly website.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to just go over a few things. We are running a little bit longer because we took some questions, and I want to wrap it up so we have time for questions. So I'm just going to go through a few more things and then we'll open it up for questions. So in terms of changes resulting from COVID, as you all know, we are not doing in-person receptions and events as we normally do, and most, if not all, members are not having in-person meetings at the Senate, House, or state buildings. So everything will be virtual. You have access to your legislators and staff through virtual meetings. You can phone them and email them as you usually do, and that's actually pretty important because that's the most common way of contacting them this year. But you can request virtual meetings. Most members are doing Zoom meetings and sessions like this, obviously. So feel free to do that. You may have staff members a little bit more than members just because of the challenges in terms of the time the legislators are spending doing committee hearings and their work. So, but getting a meeting with a member or the staff is always a great way to get your group in front of them about your issue. There are bill drafting and introduction limits this year, which we haven't had before. Senator Lamb, if you know Senator Lamb, last year he had 46 primary sponsor bills, which was allowed. They were unlimited. This year there's a limit of 25 primary sponsor bills per member, and you can have an additional 5 if you pre-file them, meaning put them in before session starts. And then there are also some exceptions for local bills and things like that. Oral testimony will also be limited this year. The Senate, and I'll go over this in a second, has very strict limits. So if you'd like to do oral testimony, hopefully there's a House bill and they have much more opportunity for oral testimony from the public. The Senate will have very limited opportunities for public testimony. There's more like a rotating slot for the public to sign up for that one public favorable slot on a bill, for example, and there are 3 slots for the sponsor to select. So you would need to coordinate really closely with your sponsor on that bill to see if he or she would like to or has space to include you in the oral testimony. Written testimony is still unlimited, so everyone can submit written testimony. So that's an important way to share your views. There will be virtual hearings, like I showed you with the MyMGA sign-up process, so you know how to do that. And there are some technology and accessibility. Like I said, if you don't click save or you struggle with that sign-up process, that may make it a little more difficult, but there's a 10 to 3 hour period every sign-up day. And there are resources on the committee and the staff of the sponsoring member for your legislation who are available by phone and email. If you're having any trouble, definitely reach out to them and someone will make sure that you can do that. Or if you need accessibility accommodations for any kind of difficulty hearing or seeing or any other accommodation, the committee staff will be happy to help you figure out how to get your testimony in. There are also MyMGA YouTube channels on the website. So if you go to the main page, you can see them actually on every page, but up here on the right, you'll see there's a YouTube button as well as the MyMGA sign up an account button. And that will take you to the page for all the YouTube channels for various committees and whatever floor sessions are going on. And you can go to YouTube and sign up and or just watch them through these pages. Also on the meetings pages, you'll find for, if you go, for example, to, let's say Monday, you can see these sessions. It'll show you which meetings are happening in the subcommittees. And on the morning of the session, like at 10 a.m. on Monday, you'll be able to see a live button, which will be here, which will take you to that YouTube page where you can watch all of the sessions or meetings or whatever it is that you're trying to watch. So keep that in mind. YouTube will have almost everything we're working on this session. And like I said, all the floor sessions, committee hearings, voting sessions, which didn't used to be easily accessible. You could come watch them in Annapolis, but they were hard to identify and get. Those will be virtually live streamed and available recorded as well. So that's kind of an upside. And then a few tips just from that MyMGA presentation, just to keep in mind. Again, make sure that the email you provide when you sign up for testimony is the one that you check regularly to make sure that you can get the Zoom link. So once you've testified 2 days before the hearing, you'll sign up to testify. And then you should get a link if you've been selected to be an oral testimony witness the next day. So the day before the hearing, you'll get a Zoom link in the email to the one that you have on the MyMGA account, which will be the link you need to sign into the session to do your oral testimony the day of the hearing. In addition, once you've logged into your account, you'll select witness sign up and scroll down to find the bill. We went through this with the video, so I think you've got that those details. If anything doesn't look right, definitely contact your legislative staff for help if you're having trouble. Clearly, you want to select, the right position, favorable if you're in favor of a bill. Just to give you some general understanding, you can obviously sign up for either oral, written, or both testimonies. So you want to make sure you select the right thing. And if you're in the Senate, you definitely want to coordinate with the sponsor of the bill about oral testimony because of those kind of limitations on how many sponsor favorable witnesses will be kind of allowed to be selected by the sponsor. And then there'll be one open favorable slot. And then there's different rules for unfavorable and favorable with amendment, which again, we can answer in the discussion if you have more questions later. But I would coordinate with the sponsor if you're trying to be favorable and supportive. And then written, of course, is always allowed. Remember to click save at the end because you can sign out of the system. It won't stop you and you may not be actually signed up. So make sure you do that and double check that you are signed up. This is just a short chart so you get that gist of if it's a Friday hearing, for example, and you want to sign up for oral and written testimony. On Wednesday would be the date between 10 and 3 that you would need to sign up. And then on Thursday would be when you would get your notification on the Zoom. So this would show you generally when you need to sign up for a hearing on a particular date, depending on what your kind of position is and who you're coordinating with as far as sponsors. Again, you'll receive a Zoom link after you sign up. And these are the general, parameters for that. In terms of planning your remarks, time limits are going to vary whether you're in the Senate or the House, and the number of witnesses allowed will vary. As I mentioned, the House generally is allowing up to 50 witnesses. So there's relatively open amounts of numbers of witnesses who can sign up. They do have pretty strict limits on how long you can testify. You should definitely go to the committee page where it has the witness guidelines on that committee page for whatever hearing you're going to be attending, and double check what the rules are for how long you're going to have. Chairs can change that too. So I would probably, recommend having a longer and a shorter version in case they shorten you up to a minute and you thought you'd have 2 or 3, that you can do your testimony in a shorter period just in case they get a lot of witnesses and the chairs decide to do that. But generally, you'll have plenty of opportunities for oral testimony in the House. In the Senate, it's much more restricted. So in the Senate, where I work, you'll have, technically there will be 4 favorable witnesses for oral testimony that will be allowed, 2 favorable with amendment witnesses allowed, and 4 unfavorable witness slots, and they'll be handled differently than usual. The 3 favorable witnesses will be selected by the sponsor. So you'll sign up like regular through the sign up page. You'll indicate you're an oral and written testimony witness and sign up normally, but your bill sponsor will also have to get contact information from you. And on the day of sign up, send the committee staff a message that says that these are the 3 sponsor selected favorable oral witnesses that he or she would like to be guaranteed a slot for oral testimony. And then there will be 1 more favorable witness slot that's just an open public sign-up slot. So there'll be everybody who signed up for oral testimony who wasn't selected as a sponsor selected witness will just be on a lottery basis selected out of the folks who signed up for that fourth slot or have signed up for oral testimony favorably. And that information will just be randomly selected, and a Zoom link will be sent to one of those individuals the day before the hearing. So you have to watch your email to see if you've been selected for that oral testimony slot for favorable position. The unfavorables, there are 2, and there are 4 for unfavorable. Those are managed a little bit more directly by the chair, who may have to select from certain organizations to make sure that they feel they get representation for anyone who's favorable with amendment or with an unfavorable position. In the House, there'll be a lead proponent, which is the first sponsor selected witness who does oral testimony will get 5 minutes to testify. And then the other 2 witnesses selected will get 2.5 minutes. And that open public oral testimony witness will get 2.5 minutes to testify. And I think I described already the rest of these comments, but you can check these slides later for these details to refresh your memory. Like I mentioned, there are YouTube channels where you can watch live committee hearings. If you're not testifying and you just like to watch, you can do that. And then in terms of being an impactful advocate, many of you are very advanced advocates, I think, who have lots of expertise, and maybe you can share with us your suggestions. But these are a few things if you haven't really done a lot of advocacy and are trying to think of how to get engaged. I find that, those videos that I mentioned are very important, very useful. So please take some time to go over those so you're familiar and comfortable. Get comfortable with navigating the MGA website. Get to know the legislators and their staff. Feel free to reach out by email, phone calls, and coordinate Zoom meetings. You can influence them, and the legislators are depending on their staff heavily to meet with constituents and to help them get through this session. You can join clubs, associations, service organizations. Any affiliation that you already have is a good place to start if you share some thoughts on that particular topic with others that you want to coordinate with and try to get engaged with doing group testimony. And then attending virtual events. There's a lot of organizational events that are all virtual that are happening all the time, lobby days, etc. Feel free to sign up for those and show up for those to get oriented and coordinate with others who are doing group activities to influence legislators. Some people choose to engage in political party activities. That can be useful as well. And then in joining friends to work with your advocacy journey with other people is always more effective and more fun, frankly. So we have Quaker Voice, and then any other affiliations you already have would be great. So I've talked for a long time and we went a little bit over, so I apologize for that. But I do want to go ahead and open up for questions. There are some questions written in the slides which we can address, but I think I want to pause and let anybody who'd verbally like to ask a question to go ahead and do that so that we can address those.
Erinn, thank you so much. I do have a question. I'm assuming when you give testimony that it's useful to know something about the position of, your legislators and kind of where the committee is leaning and what they're hearing and what, if you're for it, what the opposition is saying so that you can counter it. That's kind of the stop for me as to how do I get smart enough about what the issues are to testify. Well, not so much the issues, but really more the politics to understand how to phrase what I'm saying the most effective way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a much tougher question, some of these more technical things, and I will try to answer that. I would say some things have to do with using some of the tools that I just mentioned in terms of, let me get out of this and get back to maybe some place where I can show the website. So one issue would be using the website to get information. Like I mentioned, you can go to previous, so if it's a bill, for example, that was already heard last year, mm-hmm. You can go to the hearing for last year, for example, and let's see if I can go. I'm just going to pick one that I know the number for. So this is a bill I'm working on with Senator Lamb. It has a bill that was from last year, that was introduced last year, and I'm going to click that bill that's on the bill page for that bill for this year, but it had one last year. And I can go down to this video, which would be this, this movie symbol is where I would watch the video for the hearing that happened last year. And then I can also look at the witness list here to get, and I can read the testimony from everybody who submitted written testimony is here for this bill that was presented last year. And since we lost a lot of our legislation last year, a lot of bills this year are reintroductions of bills that were, you know, good to go or might have passed last year. We just ran out of time. So I think for a lot of bills, a great way to get oriented is to use the website and these links and the existing testimony that's already there to get oriented on the bill and the different positions of folks either favorable or against. And when you watch the video, you'll see that the sponsor, so let's see, let me go back a page here. If I go to judicial proceedings for this bill for last year, if I click that video, it's going to pull up the video, and the first, you know, few minutes is always going to be the sponsor giving their position on the bill. And then there will also be witnesses and legislators on the, you know, who asked questions or kind of expressed opinions about the bill during the hearing. And if they were oppositional or they had questions challenging, you know, the bill, those will be in the hearing. So I think watching the hearing from last year, if there is one, is a great way to get oriented. Looking at the testimony from last year is a great way to get oriented. Doing just a simple Google search is a great way to get oriented, where you can search on that topic or that particular bill if you have a bill number, and see what's out there in terms of articles where people might have been interviewed about a particular bill and given their opinions on where they stand for or against. You can certainly always send an email or make a phone call to a particular member's office who's maybe on the committee, who's going to vote it out of committee first, and get their position and say, what's your member's position on this bill? And sometimes they'll tell you, they'll say, oh, he's favorable for that. He's definitely going to vote for that. Or maybe they'll say, oh, she hasn't taken a position on that bill yet. And then you can know that that's somebody you want to work on, you know, to share your opinion and to encourage them, or maybe have a meeting with their staff and say, well, I have an opinion on that bill and I want my friends and I want to come and have a Zoom meeting with you and talk to you about our position and encourage your member to, when they get a chance, and the committee in particular, to vote it out of committee. So those are some ways that come to mind. Did I completely answer that question, or you want to follow up?
Yeah, that was great. I was a little confused with when you were going back to seeing the testimony people had given. I didn't see any written testimony. Is that?
It is. So this is the first year we've had this. Actually, last year, they made us do this painful process of submitting electronically our written testimony. And so at the end of session, they posted all of it onto each of the bill pages. So when you, on any bill for last year that was, that's in the system, when you go down to this committee testimony section, which I hope you can see on my screen, there's a witness list. And when you click the witness list, you get the list of everyone, and you're going to be doing this year too. So yours is going to show up here eventually if you've signed up, and your name will show up, an organization, your position. And then over on the right, it says oral testimony. If it's oral only, there won't be a link to written. But if it was written only, or if it was oral and written, if you click on it, you actually get to see the testimony, which was a great feature that was added last year, because now instead of having to go down to the committee and pull it out of a hard copy file, you actually can see all of this through PDFs online, which is, I think, it's great for staff. And I think it's great for the public too, because you get to see all the testimony that was submitted last year. And so these will be available on any bill that took place last year. Should have
great, thank you. I was just misreading because all I saw was oral testimonies. I didn't realize that the written was. Thank you.
Nope, no problem. Yep, that's what those little blue links are here over under testimony. These are all the written testimonies that were submitted for this bill last year. And so it's a great resource for this year. You can see some of them. This one has a lot of testimony. So anything that obviously advocates can do too, to read through all those things and maybe come up with key points from those groups or those testimonies as part of your testimony, or as just a basis, you know, of kind of a background, or referencing those in your argument. Say, yeah, you had great testimony last year from this group on this issue, and they made this point. So as a research tool, it's awesome for getting up to speed on that issue, because you get to see all the different views from last year. And you can use those in your testimony, or at least have them as a frame of reference for discussions with your members.
Thank you.
Other questions? Should we go back to some of the questions that were submitted?
So we're
Erinn, a quick question, Erinn. In terms of submitting written testimony, is there a sweet spot between sort of, you know, one sentence, please support, I really like this, and, you know, a tome with references Who reads it? Does staffers read it? Do the actual members of the committee read it? And what's a good length for written testimony?
Yeah, that's a great question. Definitely shorter is usually better, although some testimony that's submitted where if you have, especially for organizations really, but even individuals, if you have, an article or you have, something where you have data and charts that you want to submit with your testimony, it certainly could be more than a page, but it is helpful given, like you saw on that bill I showed as an example, there were probably 20 witness testimonies that were submitted for just that one bill. And we process anywhere from 2,500 to 3,000 bills at the General Assembly every year. Clearly, not every member or even staffer has read everything, even for their primary sponsor bills necessarily. Although I think that the staffers have read all their primary sponsor bills, the favorable testimony they collect, they definitely review it. So I think shorter is good. I think getting the top and the first part of your testimony to maybe hit the highlights of what your position is and why is great. And then if you want to add supplemental details, if it's a personal story, you certainly should and can take the time within preferably a page or two probably to write up your story or your position or why you feel that way. If you have something where you're an organization or you have data that you think is relevant and you want to include it, you certainly can include that. And sometimes the graphical presentation of that is even helpful or more effective. And the member might be scanning through the testimony, getting the gist of the verbal written testimony. And then if there are images attached or something data attached, they might scan that too and keep that in mind. So I think that the members and the staffers are going to be scanning through as much, if not all, the testimony they can process, and then kind of selecting or grabbing the pieces that they think are most relevant to either asking questions during committee hearings or kind of supplying their position on that particular bill. And so you never know which member is going to resonate with which types of testimony. So I think all testimony is very important, and the members are hopefully scanning through it, or their staff are, to make sure that they're kind of interpreting and absorbing as much as possible. If it gets too long or too wordy, yeah, it is a little probably less likely that the member might read it all directly. But you never know, if you need more time, you certainly can take that. But certainly I think a one-page testimony is probably good, maybe two, and only have extra if you really need extra space for data or something longer. And if you don't know how to combine PDFs, I can help you with that later, or somebody who wants to essentially take like a short one-pager with your story and your written testimony, and maybe you found an article that you think really is very important and you would love for the member to read it or a staff member to have that as a reference. There are ways to just combine your PDF so your testimony includes that at the bottom as part of it. So we can technically help you with that too if you want to do that. So in terms of having extra, you might have an extra section that's maybe there if the member wants or needs to read more, but they may not. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. It's very helpful.
Okay.
So, Erinn, it's about 1:22 and we're going to wrap things up at 1:15 and have a couple of questions answers. I did have one thing that I think we've had questions with in the past that I wanted to have you answer before we could let friends, if they had other things to move on to, could sign off, or if friends want to stick around, keep the conversation going. Erinn and I are always down to talk more about these things. But one thing that I think comes up is thinking about testimonies and when is it more powerful, or is it more powerful to be submitting a testimony as part of a group or organization or a meeting, as opposed to submitting a testimony as an individual? And I think it's appropriate to do both, but maybe there's sometimes when you would prefer to do one over the other. I was wondering if you could share a little bit about that.
Sure. Yep. That's a good question. Clearly, I think that it is good to go ahead if you feel that you have something you want to say as an individual, or you have a story, especially a compelling story on the issue that you want to share, that it is good to go ahead and submit your individual written testimony. That can always be in addition to a group that you're affiliated with. I think group testimony is very helpful and effective in terms of amplifying a position. So if you and your group share a position, your individual testimony is great, especially if you're a constituent of that particular member. So the individual testimonies are helpful because maybe you have, for example, Quaker Voice is all over Maryland. And when Quaker Voice submits their testimony, it it shows a larger group of many people who are supporting that statement or that position, which amplifies the impact to some degree to the person who's reading it, the legislator who's reading it. Whether it's a small group, like each meeting can submit testimony, Quaker Voice could submit testimony, BYM could submit testimony. I mean, any overlapping groups, larger, smaller, are good for different reasons. Obviously, the bigger groups show a larger number of people potentially associated with that feeling on that bill. The smaller associations show that those meetings are technically, like Molly showed earlier, are located in certain districts. And so that meeting is considered a constituent meeting to some degree. That whole group are constituents for whatever member that you're communicating with, or who's reading the testimony. It might be somebody who's in that, the member for that district. And then certainly the individual members have their own legislative districts associated with them. And so each of those testimonies layers up with and matches up to different members of the community in different ways. And so any or all of them can be helpful in terms of getting the member that you're really trying to target, who might be the one who's making the really critical decision on that. So if they're in our EHE, for example, and education, health, and environment, we have sometimes close votes where a couple members flipping one side or the other on an issue are really important. So if I submit written testimony to Senator Hester, for example, in my district, who often is moving one side or the other of an issue, because of her constituents and her background, I might have more influence submitting individual testimony to her, or as a Patapsco friend, for example, that's in her district. We as a group could submit it directly to her or to a group, and it's going to have hopefully a little bit stronger impact with your constituent member, because that's the one who has a personal connection and relationship with you as as a constituent. So I think all those things factor in and have different pluses and minuses, but generally I would say the more testimony, the better, because you're just more likely for it to be available and for a member who happens to look it up to feel like they feel it has impact because it's a lot of Quakers all over Maryland and they recognize that, or because it's their constituent member and so they want to respond to constituent members that they know. Certainly if you know the members, that's also helpful, when you submit your testimony and they know you and they go, oh, okay, I always get a good advice from that person, or I rely on them for their input for that group. So those are my thoughts on kind of the various ways testimony can kind of impact outcomes.
Great, thanks, Erinn.
Sure.
At this point, due to time, I will formally close this gathering, but there are a couple questions we didn't get to address yet, and we can stick around and answer some of those if friends want to stay. I know Jim had a question he shared, and some others did as well. But thank you, Erinn, for sharing your time with us, and thank you for Patapsco for giving us an opportunity to share this presentation a second time. We're open to providing more resources to you guys if you got inspired about something in particular. Erinn is always an awesome resource and super available. I don't know how, because she's filled with lots of activities, but she always shares her time with people who have questions or are interested. So thank you guys all for your interest today, and I hope that we run into each other in the advocacy world.
Thank you so much.
Okay. And I will stay on. I know there were several questions, so we'll go ahead maybe and stop the recording, and then I'll just stay online. I would be happy to answer any questions. I know we ran a little bit long, and if you did have a question, I'd be happy to answer that.